I don't know about you, but I've been a football fan for 17 years and I'm really starting to lose my love for the game. Football is becoming less accessible, less competitive, more and more money orientated, and more predictable, frankly. There are too many games, there just are too many games, and that's because there's too many nonsense competitions, and that's causing us to have way more player injuries than we should have, despite having access to better medical treatment than we ever have before. There's talk of player unions going on strike due to the number of games. The standard of officiating in the Premier League is laughable, quite frankly. Time wasting and lack of sportsmanship is just rampant, it really is. And fans feel like they're being completely ripped off for just wanting to support and follow their team. Ticket prices are just continuing to rise. I think we're also starting to see a deterioration in the quality and the intensity of games, and this is most prevalent during the end of season summer tournaments. I think the Euros in 2024 is a prime example of that, how the intensity of the calendar is affecting the quality of the entertainment. As a fan, it's easy to just argue, well, oh, they're paid an absurd amount, which they are, obviously, so, or they can just kind of get over it and deal with it. That just completely misses the point for me. See, footballers, in my opinion, are being massively overworked, though it is hard to feel sorry for someone like a Luke Shaw who misses about 60 to 80% of a season on a wage of 150 grand a week, granted. But the people being screwed over the most, as per usual, is the fans. It just is. Football is like most men's favourite TV show, right? You've got your narratives that are all going on, you've got your characters that you're rooting for. But the overexposure of games makes it much harder for you to follow your team. It's not easy for people, especially who have to juggle life responsibilities, to find, 2 hours twice a week of time just to watch your team on TV, or much less actually go to the games twice a week. It's too much to follow, and it's hard to actually stay in the loop. And the real hit on the fans, despite the consistently climbing prices, is the lack of quality that we're getting to see. We're getting so many top stars injured, the likes of Rodri and Saka this season, and the entire Spurs team. So that's one thing, we're rarely getting to see these teams play each other at their best, at their full complement. But even past that, I think most people will tell you football, entertainment-wise, isn't as good to watch as it was 15 years ago. Now, nostalgia is a thing, yes, and the tactics of modern football have evolved, but towards the ends of seasons, you're seeing a lot of players just absolutely knackered, and we're not getting value for money. And now this season, the Champions League group stage has been overhauled, so now instead of your team playing 6 group games, you are going to play 8 and potentially 10 if you finish in the playoff spots. That means if you potentially play all possible games in the Champions League, you could play 17 Champions League games in a season. That is half a Bundesliga season. Not only that, but now the Club World Cup is expanding to 32 teams, so that's 7 games that your team have to play in the summer when they're supposed to be resting anyway. England insists on having 2 domestic cups instead of 1. Then you've got the World Cup, the Euros and Copa America, all expanding to have more teams and games in there as well. It's non-stop. Take Rodri, right? If Rodri hadn't, got injured, if he had stayed fit and Manchester City had played every single game that they possibly could play in the season, which, isn't unheard of for them, and Rodri had played every international game available for Spain in the 24 to 25 season, he would have racked up, in this scenario, 89 games in a season. The fact that that's possible is madness. And with Pep, you never know, he'd have probably started him because City can't do jack all without him. I think we need to give fans way more value for money. I think we need to make the sport more accessible. I also think we need to give players more recovery time so they can play at a high level. And we need to reform or scrap some nonsense competitions. This is episode 1 in a 4-part series where I'm going to try and reform all of football and fix all of its problems, which, yes, does require 4 separate videos. But today I'm going to be looking at club competitions specifically. In the next parts, I'm also going to be looking at international competitions, I'm going to be looking at officiating and the rules of the game, and I'm also going to be looking at the financial structure of the sport. But all that is still to come. One last thing before we get started, this is just what I personally would do if I was in charge somehow of every single football governing body. Like if I was the dictator of football, because this scenario is not particularly realistic, it's not realistic at all actually, but I really believe that if all governing bodies just came together to make these rule changes happen, football would have a boom, a new boom period of popularity that would more than compensate them financially. I think football could make way more money than it does if it just sorted its life out. I think all of my reforms and rule changes in this series would make football an immeasurably more enjoyable sport for everyone. However, let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. But without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing I would do with the club competitions, first of all, change Champions League back to 32 teams, have 8 groups of 4. Back to the way it was, it worked. I can see the appeal in the Champions League structure that we've got this season, but there's too many games. You can't do that format with just 6 games, and I think you're throwing way too many games in. The fixture list is way too congested, and it's actually quite hard to follow that big league structure, so I'm taking it back to 32 teams. And also the Club World Cup goes back to the way it was. We don't need this 32 teams in the summer nonsense, okay? There's no point. No one cares ultimately about the Club World Cup. We'll keep it the way it was. All right, this is a big one. This is a big change. I would stipulate that all top leagues in the world, including the Premier League, go down to 18 teams. I would stipulate that if you want to compete in a continental competition, your league has to be 18 teams. This would improve the competitiveness. I'm going to look at the Premier League specifically here, but I think this works broadly. For the Premier League, this would improve the competitiveness of the competition and take away fixtures whilst still having exciting football, still having a good number of teams in there, but you take away 4 games in that season and suddenly each game is more intense, it's more competitive, and there's less player fatigue. Now, this might make you wonder what's going to happen with the EFL. With the EFL, I'm going to have each league have 20 teams, but I'm also going to add a League 3 into the Football League pyramid. So, the amount of teams in the Football League, if I've got my maths correct, goes from 92 teams to 98. Now, in the video that I do on the financial state of the game, I will talk more about the EFL in terms of how much they're being screwed over and how we can fix that financially in terms of the parachute payments, etc. However, that's not for this video. That means the Football League is going to have way less games per season. Okay, you're going to have 8 games less for each team. And what you'd do is you'd have one season where it'd be a bit mental, but actually quite fun, where you'd have like 8 or so relegation spots in each league, and you'd sort it all out, and then loads of teams, well actually a few teams, would get promoted from the National League into League 3. It'd be a bit chaotic for one season, but actually quite fun, and then you'd sort out your league into this structure. And this next one is actually my favourite change. I think they should do this in real life. Even if they do nothing else, they should do this. Make the League Cup, keep it, but have it so that if you are qualified for a European competition that season, you don't compete in the League Cup. So the League Cup is essentially going to be for teams that finished 8th place in the Premier League or lower, even down to League 3. So that gives teams like Crystal Palace and Brighton and Newcastle and Brentford and those kind of teams, Everton even potentially, the chance to win a trophy. It gives them something to go for. It gives them a chance at glory at Wembley. The teams, the Big Six, the teams in the Champions League, etc., they don't really want to be tied down with the League Cup. If they're honest, they don't want it because they're worried about Europe. It's just too much fixture congestion, and it's an unfair advantage actually for the other European teams who only have one domestic cup to deal with. England have 2, and it's never made sense to me unless you make it so that the League Cup is an opportunity for these slightly lesser teams to go and win a trophy. I'm also going to scrap FA Cup replays. Now this will be compensated. I know you're going to argue, well, FA Cup replays are a massive, bit of revenue for lower league teams. Don't worry, the lower league teams are going to be taken care of financially. It's not going to be this lottery ticket of, oh, we might get a game at Old Trafford every 10 years. No, there's actually going to be proper funding for Football League clubs, so don't worry about that. Now for the Champions League as well, going back to that, I'm going to have it so that domestic cup winners in a country qualify automatically for the Champions League unless there is one qualifying place allocated to that country. So say it's Croatia and they get one team, the league winners will go to the Champions League. But the Premier League, for example, where we have 4 qualification places, I'll have it so that the top 3 in the Premier League automatically qualify, and then the FA Cup winners will qualify automatically for the Champions League. And say the FA Cup winners are in the top 3 anyway, then you go 4th place gets the Champions League. I think that massively increases the prestige of the FA Cup, and the prestige of that is dwindling, quite frankly. So that gives the FA Cup way more importance. It gives every domestic competition more importance. And look, it's called the Champions League. So I don't understand why we don't put more importance on the cup competitions and say, if you are a champion of the FA Cup or of the German Cup or the Copa del Rey in Spain, then you get to go to the Champions League. It just will make every tournament in Europe way more prestigious and way more exciting. It also gives underdog teams another path to get in there. Take, for example, I don't know, a Brighton or a Southampton, not this season obviously, but they actually could, if they have an underdog win, go to the Champions League, and that would be massive for a club. Look at Wigan in 2013 or Portsmouth in 2009. Imagine if those clubs, having won the FA Cup, had gone to the Champions League, what that would have done for those clubs. So it's just more opportunity for smaller clubs to rise the ranks. And one last thing on the club football calendar, I'm going to make sure, because we've got less games now, so we've got less fixture congestion, we now have room for a global winter break. And we can count maybe the MLS and some other leagues that have different start times in this, but I'm talking Europe especially. You have 3 weeks in December where there's a complete break, so players can get back to fitness, and then we kick off on Boxing Day. We restart the Premier League and the global game on Boxing Day, and that's a big day. We love our Boxing Day games, especially here in England, so that's when it comes back. But those are just my ideas. Let me know what you think of them in the comment section as well. Thank you very much for watching, and fingers crossed, I think with those changes, club football would be so much better off for it. But don't forget, if you did enjoy the video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And thank you for watching, and I shall see you later.